My name is Jessica Goke, and for the longest time, I thought I was doing everything right. I wasn't perfect, far from it, but I was the dependable one, the one who cleaned up messes, literal and emotional, the one who didn't complain, didn't explode, just kept it together for the sake of the family. But let me tell you, even the strongest bridges crack when people keep driving over them like they own the road. It started when my mom married my dad. At least, that's where my story truly begins. You see, Dad had already been married once before. His first wife gave birth to Kayla, my future stepsister, and after their divorce, things were a little complicated. I was born a few years later, and before I could even say sippy cup, my mom and Kayla's mom were chatting on the phone like old friends. Yeah, I know. Wild, right? No wicked stepmother drama, no tension-filled drop-offs, just cooperation, respect, sometimes even laughter. I'd come home from school and find Kayla's mom in our kitchen, sipping coffee with mine like they were co-parenting gurus. It was bizarre, but it worked. Kayla started visiting us on weekends and holidays. She was only a year older than me, and even though we were technically stepsisters, from the jump, we acted like we'd been born into the same chaotic, blended little universe. We built blanket forts that took over the entire living room. We whispered secrets under the covers until midnight. We even wrote a ridiculous sister song that we performed for the family on birthdays, complete with hand gestures and dramatic bows. Those were the good days. I hold on to them like photos in a dusty scrapbook, snapshots of pure, uncomplicated joy. But kids grow up. By the time high school rolled around, Kayla and I were different. She drifted toward loud friends who lived for parties, while I buried myself in study groups and student council. She came home reeking of strawberry vape and leftover pizza, and I became obsessed with planners and saving up for college. That's not to say we hated each other. We just stopped seeing eye to eye. She also got messy. Like, I'll clean it later messy that somehow turned into never. Towels on the bathroom floor, makeup on the counter, food wrappers under the couch. Every time I brought it up, politely at first, she'd wave me off with a lazy, yeah, I'll get to it. Spoiler alert, she never got to it. I tried to keep the peace. I really did. But it was frustrating, especially when Mom would sigh and tell me, Jessica, sweetheart, just clean it up for her. She's a guest. A guest? She was more like a hurricane in skinny jeans. Still, I bit my tongue and did it. Again and again. I told myself I was the mature one, the responsible one, the peacekeeper. That kind of self-talk can really mess you up if you're not careful. Eventually, Kayla moved back in with her mom full-time. I went off to college. We only saw each other on holidays, and I figured that chapter of my life was closed. College was a fresh start. I worked part-time at a bookstore, took full course loads, and lived on peanut butter sandwiches to save every dollar I could. My grandparents, on my mom's side, were my biggest cheerleaders. They'd call just to say how proud they were. When I graduated, I got a decent job right away. Nothing fancy, but steady, with benefits, and enough income to think about renting my own place. My parents were supportive too, in their own way. Mom would swing by my tiny rental with bags of groceries. Dad once dropped off a toolbox with a note that read, "You never know." But it was my grandparents who made the dream of homeownership feel possible. They gifted me a generous sum, quietly, humbly, along with a letter that said, "Use this when you're ready to plant your roots." So I did. I found a cozy little apartment that didn't feel like a starter place. It felt like mine. I painted the walls myself, hung up thrifted art, moved in with only what I needed. In the dining room, I placed the antique table my great-grandmother left me, polished, cherished. I also tucked away a bottle of red wine, aged and expensive, for a someday I hadn't defined yet. That first night in my new home, I sat on the floor, pizza box open in front of me, breathing in the clean scent of paint and dreams coming true. 6 months in, life was good, peaceful, predictable. Then the phone rang. "Jessica, honey, I need to ask a favor." My mom's voice floated through the receiver, sweet and careful. My stomach tensed. "What kind of favor?" "It's about Kayla," she said. And instantly my peace felt like it had an expiration date. "She just got a job in the city. Isn't that great? But she doesn't have a place to stay yet. Could she crash with you? Just until she gets on her feet?" I stared at the wall in silence. The same Kayla who couldn't put a towel in the laundry basket? In my home? "It'll just be for a couple of months," Mom continued, already sensing my hesitation. "You have a guest room. She's family." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Okay, 2 months max. Mom practically squealed with relief. Thank you, sweetie. You're such a good sister. That night, Kayla arrived like a storm front. 4 oversized suitcases, a glittery makeup bag, and an attitude. Within an hour, my spotless living room was covered in jeans, bras, and shoes she hadn't even worn yet. The next few days were like déjà vu. Dirty dishes stacked in the sink, takeout boxes everywhere, clothes scattered like confetti. I asked, politely at first, for her to pitch in. I'll do it later, she muttered, eyes glued to her phone. Later never came. Then the clothes started disappearing. Mine. From my closet. I found them bunched up in her room, wrinkled and half-worn. When I confronted her, she shrugged. We're the same size. Don't be uptight. Uptight? I wanted to scream. But the final straw, the moment that finally cracked the foundation, was the food. I'd meal prep for work, label leftovers, even hide the good snacks. Didn't matter. Kayla devoured everything like a locust. One night, I came home from a 12-hour shift, starving, only to find the fridge wiped clean. Kayla, you can't just eat everything without replacing it, I said, standing in front of the empty shelves. I'm your guest, she replied. Hosts take care of their guests. I blinked, stunned. That's not how this works. She waved me off. Fine, I'll just order takeout. That was it. I was done playing the responsible one, the generous host, the sainted sister. But little did I know, the worst was yet to come. About 2 weeks into this disaster of a living arrangement, I was already dreaming of my quiet little sanctuary being mine again. I had started counting the days, literally. I had a calendar in my planner with big red X's crossing out each 24-hour survival streak. Kayla was driving me up the wall. One particularly brutal day at work, I came home expecting to crash on the couch and nuke some leftovers. I was craving quiet, maybe a glass of wine, not conversation, not chaos. But as soon as I stepped through the front door, something felt off. The lights were out. My heart gave a tiny, hopeful skip. Maybe she was out. Maybe I had the place to myself for the evening. I tiptoed into the living room, soaking in the silence, until I noticed a flickering glow from around the corner. Candlelight. I froze. As I stepped in, what I saw hit me like a punch in the gut. Kayla and some guy I didn't recognize were sitting at my great-grandmother's antique dining table. The one I barely used because it was so sentimental. The one I protected with my life. Candles flickered on the table, casting romantic shadows. They were laughing, flirting, feeding each other takeout from paper containers on top of my family heirloom. But the cherry on top? That expensive bottle of red wine I'd been saving for a special occasion? It was already half gone, sitting open between them. I turned on the light and just stood there. What the hell is this? I said, my voice sharp and low. Kayla jumped, then groaned when she saw me. Jessica, oh my God, you scared us. Who is this? I pointed at the man, who was now giving me a look that said, You're the buzzkill here. Why are you using my table, my wine, and, wait, are those my crystal glasses? Kayla smiled like it was nothing. This is Derek, she said, as if we were being introduced at brunch. And this is a special occasion. It's our 3rd date. I blinked. I don't care if it's your anniversary. You brought a stranger into my home without asking. You opened my wine. You're using my heirloom furniture like it's your personal picnic table. Derek cleared his throat. We're trying to have a romantic evening. Could you maybe grab coffee or hang with a friend tonight? Give us a little privacy? Did this man just suggest I leave my own home? Kayla chimed in, draping herself over Derek's shoulder. Seriously, Jessica, don't be a buzzkill. We're just trying to have some quality time. I stared at them, stunned. Get out! Derek raised an eyebrow. Or what? Or I call the police and report you for trespassing. Kayla gasped. You wouldn't. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Try me. Derek stood up, muttering under his breath. This is ridiculous. I'm out of here. Derek, wait! Kayla scrambled after him, but not before shooting me the ugliest glare I've ever seen. Thanks a lot, Jessica. You just ruined everything. She slammed the door behind her so hard that the frames on my wall rattled. I sank into a chair, still stunned. All I'd wanted was leftovers and peace. Instead, I got a circus. And now, apparently, I was the villain for protecting my own home. The next morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Mom. Of course it was. How could you? She snapped before I even said hello. Your own sister. Mom, let me explain. Explain what? That you embarrassed her? That you threatened her date with police? Honestly, Jessica, what happened to you? I rubbed my temples. Did she tell you she used Grandma's china? That she opened my special bottle of wine without asking? That she brought a total stranger into my apartment and basically threw a dinner party while I was at work? Oh, Jessica, Mom sighed, dripping with disappointment. When did you become so selfish? I stared at the ceiling in disbelief. She trashed my apartment, eats my food, disrespects me daily, and I'm the selfish one? She's just trying to figure things out. She's struggling. She needs support. She needs rules, I snapped. She doesn't pay rent. She doesn't clean. She doesn't respect boundaries. You don't treat family like this. That stung more than I expected. Before I could reply, Mom hung up. Just like that. An hour later, the phone rang again. Kayla's mom. Because apparently, everyone had something to say about my behavior. Jessica, we need to talk, she said, her tone sharp and formal. Let me guess. Kayla told you her version of last night? She told me how humiliated she was. She's heartbroken. I couldn't help but laugh. She brought a man into my apartment, trashed my things, opened my wine, and I'm the villain? She's been nothing but inconsiderate since she moved in. You've changed, Kayla's mom said coldly. Ever since you bought that apartment, you've become arrogant, controlling. That's not fair. Not fair? You forgot where you came from. When your mom first moved in with your dad, she stayed with us. You stayed with us. And we welcomed you. We never kicked you out. That was different. We didn't trash your house or throw dinner parties on your dining table. You're too uptight. It's the little things, Jessica. She's young. You're treating her like a criminal. I took a deep breath. If she doesn't like living with me, she's welcome to leave. There was a beat of silence on the other end. I see, she said. I'll be speaking with your parents. This isn't over. Click. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. My stomach was in knots. And honestly, I started to wonder, was I overreacting? Was I being too strict? Too protective of my space? That didn't last long, because that evening, after a hellish day at work, I got another call. Mom again. What is wrong with you? She snapped. I just got off the phone with Kayla's mother. She's devastated. I sat on the couch, head pounding. Mom, are you really taking their side? She's struggling. She's trying to get on her feet. And instead of supporting her, you threaten her, you insult her. She hasn't applied for a single job. She watches TV all day and eats everything in my fridge. She brought a man into my apartment and disrespected my space. She's not used to living independently. She's 24. She's your guest, Jessica. You're supposed to make her feel welcome. I stood up, pacing. I couldn't take it anymore. You raised me to be generous, to be kind, I get that. But this isn't kindness. This is insanity. She's your sister. She's acting like a pig in my house, I said sharply. There was a soft gasp behind me. I froze. I turned slowly. Kayla stood in the doorway, pale, eyes wide. I hadn't heard her come back. She must have heard everything. I opened my mouth. Kayla, She turned, said nothing, and walked away. I heard drawers opening, suitcases zipping, and then the front door closing behind her. The apartment was silent again. But this time, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. The silence after Kayla left wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. My apartment was quiet again, spotless even. But something about it felt unnatural. Like the silence had weight. Like it was watching me. The noise in my head didn't stop, though. I replayed that moment over and over. The look on Kayla's face, the gasp, the way she didn't say a single word, just left. I wanted to feel justified. I wanted to believe I had every right to say what I said. And maybe I did, but that didn't make me feel any less like a monster. For days, I heard nothing. No call from Kayla, no texts from Mom, no scolding voicemails from Kayla's mom. Nothing. It was like I'd been erased from the group chat of our blended family. A week passed, then 2. My apartment was cleaner than it had been in months. My fridge stayed full. The couch remained fluffed. But I felt off. It's strange how you can long for peace and then feel completely alone once you finally have it. Then one evening there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find both of my parents standing there. Mom had that look on her face, the one she used when I got caught sneaking snacks before dinner as a kid. Disappointed, defensive, ready for war. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. They came inside without saying much, and I braced myself. It didn't take long. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mom snapped, barely stepping all the way into the living room. Mom! No, I'm talking. You called your sister a pig. You humiliated her. She left here in tears. Do you think this is how a family treats each other? I folded my arms, trying to stay calm. I didn't plan to say that. I snapped. I was angry. I'd been pushed too far for too long. She's your sister, Jessica. She's a grown woman who acts like a spoiled teenager. I didn't raise you to be this cruel. And I didn't sign up to be her unpaid maid and emotional punching bag. Enough, Dad said, raising his voice, not yelling, but just enough to command attention. We both turned to look at him. He hadn't said a word until now. I think both of our daughters are wrong in this, he said carefully. What? Mom and I asked at the same time. He turned to me first. Jessica, calling your sister a pig was wrong. That hurt her deeply, and you need to apologize. I nodded slowly, my pride stinging a little. I know, I regret saying it. But, Dad continued, raising a hand as Mom opened her mouth, Kayla needs to grow up. She needs to learn how to live like an adult. And maybe leaving this apartment is exactly what she needed to realize that. Mom scoffed. Oh, so now you decide to parent? Don't do that, Dad said softly. Don't do that? Mom's voice got louder. Where were you when I was helping Kayla find jobs? When I was dealing with her mother? I've done everything to keep this family together, and now I'm the bad guy because I expect a little kindness from my own daughter? Dad looked exhausted. You're not the bad guy. And you, she spun toward me, you think you can just throw your sister out because you're the homeowner now? You didn't buy this apartment alone, Jessica. Almost everything in here was paid for by us. That's not fair, I said, trying not to yell. Yes, you helped. So did Grandma and Grandpa, but I worked 2 jobs. I saved every dollar. This place isn't just walls and furniture to me, it's my life. Mom was livid. She pointed toward the bookcase against the far wall. That bookcase? That belonged to my grandmother, which means it's my furniture, not yours. I stared at the bookcase for a moment. Then I walked over, pulled the books off shelf by shelf, and started stacking them in boxes from the storage closet. What are you doing? Mom demanded. Packing up your furniture, I said quietly. Jessica, stop, Dad said, but I kept going. Don't worry, I'll have it delivered to your house tomorrow. Since it's not mine, I don't want to hold on to it. Mom threw her hands up. I can't do this. I don't even know who you are anymore. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Dad hesitated, looking between me and the half-packed bookcase. I'll go after her, he said. Yeah, you probably should. He nodded and left quietly. I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by scattered books and silence that somehow felt louder than before. True to my word, the next day I had the bookcase delivered to Mom's house. I didn't hear from anyone for a while after that. No check-ins, no lectures, no apologies. It was just quiet. I poured myself into work. Took on more projects. Got lost in spreadsheets and strategy meetings, trying to forget that my family had cracked into pieces I wasn't sure how to fix. Then, one afternoon about a month later, my phone lit up with a text from Dad. Can we meet for coffee? That little cafe near your office? I stared at the message for a moment before typing. Okay. The next day I walked into the cafe and immediately spotted him. But he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him, nervously stirring her drink, was Kayla. I froze. Dad waved me over and part of me wanted to bolt. But I took a breath and walked to the table. Slowly, cautiously. I sat down, heart pounding. No one spoke at first. We ordered coffee. The silence stretched, thick and awkward. Then Kayla cleared her throat. So? She started, eyes down. I got a job. I blinked. That's great. Yeah, and I found my own apartment. It's small, but I like it, and I can afford it. She smiled a little. It wasn't smug. It was proud. I'm still dating Derek, she added, grinning slightly. He keeps calling you the fighting girl. Says he's never seen anyone so ready to call the cops. I laughed, just a little. He was kind of a jerk. He was, she said. We both were. She met my eyes. Jessica, I'm sorry. For everything. The mess, the food, the wine, the clothes. I was acting like a brat, and you didn't deserve that. The tightness in my chest loosened just a bit. I'm sorry too, I said softly. I shouldn't have called you a pig. That was mean. I was angry, but I didn't have to go that far. Kayla reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Living on my own. I get it now. I get why you were so upset. Being an adult is no joke. We sat there for a long time after that, just talking, laughing, letting the tension dissolve one sip of coffee at a time. We weren't fixed, not completely, but we were trying, and that mattered. Since that day at the cafe, Kayla and I have slowly started rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't immediate. There were no fairy tale apologies or perfect sisterly reunions. Just small steps, coffee once a week, texts about job interviews, the occasional meme sent late at night that made both of us laugh too hard. She even invited me over to her new apartment for dinner last week. She cooked everything herself. The kitchen was clean, candles were lit, battery-powered this time, and she even had cloth napkins folded on the table. I nearly cried. Not because of the meal, but because she was trying. For the first time, she was really trying. "I get it now," she said that night, passing me a plate of roasted veggies. "That night in your apartment, I thought you were being controlling. Now I see you were just tired and protective of your space. You worked hard for that place." I nodded. "I wasn't perfect either. I held it all in for too long, then exploded like a volcano. It wasn't fair." She shrugged. "Maybe it was. I needed the eruption. I wouldn't have moved out if you hadn't gone nuclear." We both laughed. Things with Mom, though, well, that's another story. Dad says she needs time, that she's not ready to talk yet. But I know the truth. Mom had built up this image of us, her perfect blended family, a well-oiled machine of exes and stepkids and coffee dates with her husband's former wife. And when things fell apart between Kayla and me, it shattered that image. She wasn't angry because of the wine, or the table, or even the insult. She was angry because her version of the story no longer matched reality. I haven't reached out. Neither has she. And I don't know who should go first. Maybe neither of us is ready. Maybe we're both still standing in our corners, nursing invisible bruises. Still, something strange happened a few weeks after that coffee meeting with Kayla. I came home from work, unlocked my door, and there it was, right in the middle of my living room. The bookcase. That bookcase. The one I had boxed up and shipped back to my mom's house in a moment of fury and heartbreak. It was sitting exactly where it used to be. No note, no message, no text. Just there. My breath caught in my throat. I walked over and ran my fingers across the familiar edges. A small chip in the corner I'd always meant to repair was still there. I opened the bottom cabinet and found one of my old bookmarks inside, left behind months ago. It was the same bookcase, no doubt about it. Was this Mom's way of saying she forgave me, or that she wanted to talk? Was it a peace offering, or just a return to sender? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't call to ask. Some wounds take longer to heal. Some conversations need space, and silence, and timing, so I let it be. I put the bookcase back in its old spot, slowly refilled the shelves, rearranged the books like puzzle pieces. It felt grounding. Now every time I pass by it, I think about everything that happened. I think about how families, real families, aren't like fairy tales or holiday commercials. They're messy, complicated, loud, unpredictable. Sometimes they fall apart, and sometimes, if you're lucky, they come back together, piece by piece, with a lot of effort and a little grace. Kayla and I are still figuring it out. We text most days now. She sends me photos of her cooking. I send her TikToks about terrible roommates. We make plans to meet up for sushi. We poke fun at each other like sisters again, this time with more understanding. A while back, she asked if she could borrow a book from my place. I smiled and said, "Only if you bring it back." She did, on time, and with a sticky note that read, "Don't worry, I didn't spill anything on it." Progress. It's strange to think how everything changed in just a few months. I went from nearly calling the cops on my sister to hugging her goodbye outside a cafe. Not every scar fades completely. Some just become part of your story. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Boundaries aren't unkind. Speaking up doesn't make you cruel. And expecting respect in your own home is not selfish. It's necessary. I can love Kayla and still not want to live with her again. I can love my mom and still need space from her expectations. And I can be proud of who I've become, even if not everyone in my family understands that version of me yet. I'm not the same girl who built blanket forts and whispered secrets late into the night. I'm not the pushover who cleaned up everyone else's mess just to avoid conflict. I'm Jessica Goke, and I've earned this home, this peace, this sense of self. I don't know what's coming next for our family, but I know this much. Whatever happens, I'll face it with open eyes, a clear voice, and the strength to say, no, that's not okay with me. Because sometimes standing your ground isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of mutual respect. And sometimes, just sometimes, a returned bookcase can mean more than 1,000 words.